My name is Allison Silverman. I am a teacher in New York. I've been at my job for 15 years. I teach a class called Family and Consumer Science at the middle school level. And one of my areas that I teach is cooking, nutrition kinds of things. So when I started my job at this school, I asked if I could start a garden. I was inspired by a woman named Alice Waters, who is based out of California originally, and she created the Edible Schoolyard. And she transformed communities by growing food and connecting the students to the food that they're eating. So that was where I kind of started. And then the garden has kind of taken a life of its own. And I developed a relationship with CELF a couple of years ago when I attended their summer institute on sustainability. So I've been working with them on different ideas on how to build curriculum around the important elements of sustainability. So just enough about me, because you'll learn more about me like throughout this time together. But I just want to hear your name, where you are, and kind of why you chose biodiversity or garden as your breakout room today. So let's start with Carmen.
Hi, everyone. I'm Carmen King. I am a 5th grade teacher at Mamaroneck Avenue School in White Plains. It's a public school, K-5. I am the general ed half of an ICOT class, so it's a general ed teacher and a special ed teacher teaching together. Half my class has IEPs, half my class does not. My pledge to myself and my students, who I've not met yet, but for next school year, is to get them outside. I feel like we have been trapped indoors, and there's so much great learning you can do outdoors. And so at the end of the school year, I was able to take advantage of a trail that is within 5 minutes walking distance from my school. And my kids absolutely loved it, but it was the end of the school year. So I want to see if I could get my kids out on the trail at least once a month. And I just feel like in terms of biodiversity, it would be lovely for them to kind of learn what are the trees that are native to their local area, and how do those native plants impact them, and how do we impact those native plants. So I feel like if I just start small, maybe something good will come of it.
Very cool. Carmen, we're neighbors.
Wait, where are you?
Well, I teach in Portchester.
Oh, right. Okay.
I live in West Harrison, so the next town over is
so
White
you're really
Plains.
close.
Yeah,
yes.
No, we're really close. And I have some friends whose kids have gone to your school. So we are neighbors. So if you ever need connect, we can connect.
The world is small.
It really is.
Yes.
All right, Anne-Marie,
Awesome.
You're not my neighbor in Texas.
Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Well, good afternoon. How are you all? So I have a big transition going on. I'm leaving my district after 15 years, but I'm going to another school district, and I've taught science, I've taught everything, 6th through 8th, biology, IPC. This year, though, I have been gifted my dream job. I will be a STEM educator out with the new district, and I am inheriting an aquaponics lab, and it's exciting. So at first I thought the pathway for me would have been water, but once I heard about you and biodiversity in your school garden, what I want to do is take that aquaponics program and see how we can incorporate. I'm learning more about the lab. So I would love to introduce that community to a garden. And then I also learned that aquaponics can, of course, helps with sustainability, and you can grow vegetables and things in that lab too. So I'm looking forward to hearing everything that you have.
Oh, that's great. So in the aquaponics thing, are you growing food or any type of plants, or you have
Well, we're gonna, the school is, that school is actually brand new. It was obviously was built right before COVID. And so they built that school with that lab in mind. So the lab is beautiful. Once I visited the campus, the lab is already set up with the filtration systems and everything. So I'm gonna get that lab up and running. The goal is for me to, of course, learn the process. I want to grow plants first, but then I want to also incorporate the vegetables and things so we can give back to the community. So teaching them how to have that garden to grow those vegetables for their community.
Okay, we're gonna have a nice conversation around that. Okay, nice job. Nice to meet you, Anne Marie. All right, Diana.
Hi everyone, I'm from California and I teach for LAUSD. And in my community or the school that I teach at, there isn't many green spaces in the area. And we recently had a grant for that. So we actually applied, we won, and so now we have money to embed these gardens across our campus. And we have been doing that. And now the goal is to, well, the school has to get rid of the concrete on campus and embed those green spaces. But then after, I want my students to take what they've learned on campus and do it at home. Because a lot of them just have green grass lawns instead. We need plants. And we are just starting our compost bin with worms.
Very cool. Okay, thank you so much. I have a lot to share with you too, Diana. Great job on that effort. It's great already. Emily.
Hello, everyone. I'm CELF's intern. I'm from Houston, Texas. And I guess you could say like I really love growing stuff. And so like I was attracted to biodiversity because like what me and my mom do is we do composting. So every single time like we finish eating a banana or we finish like eating orange peels, we like to use the compost to enrich the soil for our flowers and for the fruits that we're growing. So this is why I chose biodiversity.
Okay, great. Thank you, Emily. And Abigail?
Yeah, hello everyone. Good evening. In Ghana here, it's evening time, so good evening to you all. Okay, so I chose biodiversity because I felt like where I teach in my school, after dining, there are a whole lot of leftovers. And the leftovers, they don't know what they use it for. And we have vast land too there. So I thought of doing something to it. And I realized that biodiversity is the way forward. So what I want to do is that after they are done eating, I'll go for the leftovers. Then on the land there, I'll pour it. I want to do manure with it. So over some time after I get what I want, then I start farming with it. Yes, I want to turn manure into farming. So that's why I chose biodiversity. And I hope that can actually help me do what I want to do.
Awesome. So nice to have you. Very exciting to see everybody on the call. And I hope I can kind of give you all a little bit of inspiration. And after this presentation, you'll have access to my slides so you can read them and dig a little deeper. And also you have access to, me as a resource through email, and CELF will help you figure out your next steps. So, we don't have to end our new friendship right now today. It can continue because I'd love to see where all of you are in a couple of years after you're starting this whole process. So let me just share my screen and get started on this presentation for you.
I'm sorry. I just want to ask, are we recording? Because I remember them saying something about doing the recording.
It is recording.
Okay.
I heard it say it was recording, so I think it's recording. So this is my part for the pathway of biodiversity. And just to kind of start off like with the idea of a school garden, and a lot of you have shared some information about the communities that you live in, access to food, access to green spaces. You know, it's a crazy statistic that, you know, 1 in 5 children in this country are living in poverty and at risk of hunger. And so the community that I teach in, we have a high poverty rate. And a lot of our families are food insecure and do not have access to nutrition. So the basis of my school garden in particular originally was to provide food and nutrition for my students and their families. It was not science-based. My garden, I'm not a scientist. I literally was like, I put the food in the ground and it grows and that's it. I wasn't digging really deep into the science of it, but as I've grown, there has been like a whole nother world of composting and soil health and crop rotation and things that I've learned over the years. So the summertime in our school garden is like one of the most important times. And if you are going to start a garden or a green space, you have to think about when you're not at the school, how is it going to be maintained? Because you can run into like a lot of issues with maintaining such a space. That's when all the weeds grow. If you just joined the call, I'm happy to have you and we'll be able to talk. Just make sure you're muted. So we have family members that work in our garden. I have interns. I'm not sure who's on the call that's not muted. But please mute yourself. So if you want to do a garden or a green space or any sort of thing that you're going to have to build outside of your school in like outside, and this would be different for Anne Marie with aquaponics. Obviously, you're already built. So this is for people who have to build something. You need to really be clear on what you want to build and have a purpose. You need to get a lot of funding. There's a lot of challenges associated with funding things at schools. You have to get board approvals. So there's a process involved. So my recommendation is always to have a really good plan. And if you're putting a plan together and you need help, I can always be a resource for you to kind of start. Where do I start? How do I start this? And you obviously need approval. You're going to want to reach out to a lot of local resources, a support system. You need a support system. This is basic. You know, obviously, if you're going to be doing something like this, you're a trailblazer, you're a trailblazing leader, right? So you're going to do stuff that somebody hasn't done before, right? So you need help. You can't do it by yourself. And if you do, you're going to struggle. Especially when you have like, so for me, with my garden, I have the garden, but I'm still a teacher, right? And I still have all my responsibilities. So the more people that I have to support me, and help me and invested in the idea, the more successful the garden is going to be. So try to develop relationships, especially with your buildings and grounds people at your schools, with any administrators, build those relationships so that way they're on your side, because you're going to need their support in order to, you know, like if I want to put something up in the garden, like a shed or a new irrigation system, I need the support of all of those people to be successful there. So just make sure you think about that. So just a little bit about my garden, just to start, is that we donate about 1,000 pounds of food a year from my garden to the community. That's what we do with the food that we grow. We donate it to our local food banks, our food pantries. The families that come and work in the garden in the summer, they can take as much food as they want. And then in the school year, we have like maybe September and October to harvest food. And the students in my classroom, we harvest it and we actually prepare and cook it. This year, we are identifying families. We work with this organization called Open Door. It's a school-based health center, and they have identified local families that are food insecure through a series of questions that they ask their students. They've been able to identify kids that have a lack of food or a lack of nutritious food in the home. Those families can get a free community shared agricultural box. So basically they get a box every week or every month for free. We're going to be creating these big events where we do farm to table dinners, and we invite all these people from our community to come together, and we just eat a meal together. And we provide resources that we think that the families might need. And we provide those resources at a dinner table, you know, so you're sitting next to people and having conversations with people, and building relationships with people as opposed to just like seeking out support. So we're trying to open up dialogue about a lot of different topics that our families are facing, and we're doing it over a meal. One of the greatest things about food is it brings everybody together. And then also through these events, we'll be teaching families about nutritional food and cooking. Another thing that we do is we create internship opportunities for our students. So our high school kids can come back to the middle school and work in the garden in the summers, and they get paid for it. So it creates like job work for the students, where they can get paid so that they can continue to support their families, but they also get experience in doing stuff like an internship. And so that's kind of like where we want to go. And then the community partners that we work with, and you're going to have access to this so you can read through it, but your community partners, your community-based organizations is so important in building this like community of people who are working together. You know, everybody has wheels turning. And one of the cool things about working with a lot of different organizations is trying to get everybody's wheels to be rolling together. And then we have more of an impact on our goals, on our shared goals. So really quickly, if you guys are familiar with CELF and the big ideas of sustainability, the garden supports all of the ideas of sustainability and biodiversity. We can determine our connection to the garden and our community by donating the food and promoting sustainable environmental practices. The diversity and interdependence. I know that somebody said that they got their worms. Diana got her worms. We have a big compost bin in our garden. We teach about biodiversity and interdependence. And we teach these ideas through the garden. But we're also trying to teach our students that, you know, we all function together. We depend on one another, the environment, the people. So it's kind of like a big topic that I talk about in my classroom. But we have 3 different types of compost in my garden. This particular composter can take kitchen scraps. So we take the kitchen scraps from our kitchen and we put it in the garden composter, this one, and then we take compost from just like garden areas and leaves and plants, and we put that in a different area because depending on what you're, and I know that Abigail wants to try and figure out what to do with her leftovers from the school. You have to be careful on what you're putting in the garden. So like I won't take the food from my school kitchen and put it in my garden because I'm growing an organic garden. And I don't know where a lot of the stuff that's coming into the cafeteria is coming from. So there would be like different systems based on different composting systems based on what you're composting. So that's something to be mindful of. And one of the things that we talk about, and I think Carmen, you'll love this, just changes and cycles over time. So if you could get your kids out onto that path in the spring, they could document what they see. and then take them out in the winter, or then again in the spring, and then at the end of the school year. And then maybe you could even go in the middle of the summer and take photos and show them what the difference is in the summer. So like I have the kids go out in the beginning of a semester, and they document the changes to the crops over time. Like these are the little peach buds, and then they have the peach blossoms, and then they turn into the big peaches. So they do that over time. And then they report on these, and then they research recipes and all of that kind of stuff. And then we make the recipes and we make cookbooks. So, I mean, we just keep going and going. So we talk about like limits, fairness, and equity as humans. What we all have limits, but the environmental limits, you know, our crops, they have limits too. You know, if it gets too hot, everything's going to die. If they get too much water, they're going to die, you know. So we have to talk about our limits. And also when you talk about equity, food equity is a big conversation to have. Many food pantries carry dried food, canned food. A lot of families that need food assistance, they don't have access to fresh, local, organic ingredients. So the food that we're providing from our garden is creating equity in our space. So it's, we share resources and support each other. And this is the curriculum that I wrote for my classroom based on the sustainable, big ideas of sustainability. So humans and nature together make up one place, and how we can work together to improve our community and ourselves. I did hear Anne Marie say that she wants to give back to the community. If you can, you know, one of the things that I focus on in my job is service and community work. So for me, the science is amazing of what you can teach them, but my kids, a lot of the times when they work in the garden and they're doing these projects and they're doing this, making these efforts, you know, these are the kids that are carrying the sub pod up to the garden. They didn't care about biodiversity and soil health. They just thought this was the coolest thing. I got worms on Amazon. I literally bought worms, live worms, 500 of them on Amazon. They're like, Miss Silverman, you're the only person that buys worms on Amazon. And that's what they cared about. They dug the hole, they put it in there, they were saving their scraps, they were putting them in, they were feeding the worms, and, you know, getting them to do this type of work, they're learning all of these concepts, but they're enjoying it and they're seeing it and they're living it. And especially now after COVID and everybody was stuck on their screens for so long, my students have loved every minute of the garden work, every single minute of it. So I'm going to stop, I think. Oh, wait, long-term effects and equilibrium. So we grew all this food during COVID, and then we packaged it up and we brought it to our local food. We actually created our own free farmers market. We set up tables and tents, and we set it up at the senior living home in our town. And we gave a free farmers market to the senior citizens where they could walk around with their bags to all the tables and get food like they were at a farmers market. We had live music playing because these people could not leave their building. They were too afraid. This was like in the middle of COVID. So it was long-term effects, balance. Then we had an event in the garden at the end of the year where the kids could cook food from the garden and serve it to the community-based organizations that supported us and helped us. So we like threw them a party with our garden harvest. We have a butterfly garden that was created by a student. So she was interested in monarch butterflies. And their habitat's decreasing, that they're now on the endangered species list. So she built a butterfly garden. I was just at the garden yesterday, and there's about 10 monarchs flying around. And I will tell you, but you can't tell anybody else, that I am afraid of butterflies. It's a very weird phobia, I understand, but it's not just like a little afraid. It's like I'm running away from butterflies. But I let this kid build a butterfly garden in my garden. That's how much I wanted to support the effort. And she did it herself. So, and then we work with organizations that, I have somebody in the meeting room. Okay, hold on. We work with a clay center. It's like a clay art center. So they have artists that come into my classroom in the winter when I can't go out to the garden, and they teach my students how to do clay work. And we make projects based around sustainability, and they fire them and build these pieces of pottery that we put all over the garden to beautify the space, but also educate the students on the ideas of sustainability. So we have like our pollinator benches, and we have peace poles that we're building. So we kind of try to bring in all different types of elements into this type of space. All right, so I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to do that. Okay. And I'm going to ask you guys to comment, share, anything you want to say, questions. Does anybody want to start? Carmen.
I love the idea that the brainstorm ideas that you gave in terms of making sure that you know what your purpose is and identify your resources and possible challenges, and working with people, developing a team, because especially if you're brand new at something, it's great to have some expert support or somebody to help guide you, and making sure to get clearance and support from your administration. So I think all things that are super important to consider and get up and going when you're first starting your project.
Yeah, thanks for commenting on that, because so when I started this garden, I was not tenured. It was my first year. I got this guy from the community who was like really interested in building this garden up with me. And he wanted to turn the whole front of the school into a small farm. And he had all these volunteers, and we were in all these meetings, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is great. And I got approval, and we tore up the entire lawn in front of the school and planted all these plants. And I have no gardening experience, and it was a disaster. And I went in the summer, and I was pregnant with my first kid, and the weeds were taller than me. I mean, I'm only 4'11", but seriously, they were taller than me. And I was standing in the field crying, like, I'm going to get fired. Like, I'm going to lose my job in the first year, and I'm pregnant, because this isn't, what am I going to do? Because I believed in what somebody else was saying. And I remember there was an administrator that worked in my school at the time. He's retired since, but I called him and I told him what was going on. And he said, listen, you only fail if you don't try. Right? And I was like, oh gosh, thank you for saying that, because I really feel like I failed, and I could have given up that year. And there's probably 5 or 6 times in my career that I could have given up. But every time something happened where somebody else jumped in and said, no, we know that what you're doing is important. You know, CELF probably saved my garden in the last couple of years, because they're interested, invested, believe in it, right? So when you get the buy-in and you get the support and you understand that it's not going to be easy, anything is possible. And you have to allow that. You really have to allow that process.
And think about this being your first year and your administrator still being so supportive. Like, you know, if you can get your administrators to be supportive, that's like almost half your battle.
Yes. And then I had to hire a landscaper to come in and bring in pounds and like truckloads of dirt that I had to put the dirt over the farm that we built. And then I had to put grass back in so we could grow new grass. And I'm out there with my hands, you know, putting grass down to fill in the spaces that we weren't able to, you know, I couldn't manage on my own. Right. So things change over time, just like, you know, that's the whole process. Anybody else want to make a comment, or who's that? Anne Marie?
I wanted to speak to what you did share, and I appreciate that, because I recently, I definitely agree with you that you have to have all the support. You have to use the resources that's around you. That's really big. The campus that I just left, it was in the middle of, I worked with CELF in March. I joined them in March, and I was on a campus that was in the heart of the city, and we did not have any green space. So my students and I, we worked on a project to see how could we change the trajectory of that to bring a green space there. It was going to require a lot. And I remember saying to administration, I appreciated the principal for being willing to work with me, but I had to make the tough decision to say, am I willing to sow into a community that's not going to give me what I need back? Because this is going to require work, and I cannot do this alone. So I had to make that decision to leave, and it was a dream. It was a great job, right? And I've been with the district for 15 years, but this is my passion. This is what I want to do. So I got the opportunity a few months later to go to this campus that has green space, that has an aquaponics lab. So the principal so far is on board, and I let her know that this is a passion of mine. If I'm going to sow into your community, I need all the support that I can get. And I mean all hands on deck, because this is going to require a mindset shift. And you have somebody that's willing to come in and help you all out, but I need all hands on deck with that.
Yeah, I think that the bigger community you can build for yourself for these types of projects, the better it's going to be. I mean, I have a lot of friends that have done things with soil health, where they get big composters that come in, you know, they're doing composting from the school kitchens and stuff. But the programs kind of fizzle out because it's hard to sustain. So you have to continue to build relationships and be willing to adapt. And really, I urge you to figure out what your mission is going to be. Especially if you're growing food. I know that Abigail wants to grow food. Diana wants to turn her green spaces into edible spaces. And, you know, Carmen, I was thinking about you even. I follow this lady on Instagram. I'll find her Instagram and I'll send it to you. But she's a forager. I'm not going to tell you that you should get your kids to be eating stuff off the trail, but how cool is it to know that there are edible plants in these spaces. So I have a garden. I have a weed that grows in my garden. It's like a local weed. You can see it growing in sidewalks all the time, but it's edible and it's delicious and it's really, really nutritious. So I don't let them weed that. We harvest it and they eat it while we're gardening. They're like little, you know, grazers. So they eat all the purslane while we're doing the garden work and they just love it, you know? So it's like, you can really talk about that kind of stuff with your students, but really kind of why do you want to have a garden? Why do you want to grow food? What are you going to do with it? Because people need it. Anybody else want to make a comment or share a story? I know we have Philip and Peter on the call now.
Yes.
Is that Peter? Who's talking?
Well, I'm Philip.
Philip?
Yeah,
Oh, Philip.
I'm
Hello, Philip.
Yes. Hi.
Hi,
Sorry
how
for
are
being
you?
late.
Where are you from, Philip? No, that's
I'm
okay.
from
Where are you
Ghana.
from?
From Ghana.
Okay, so do you have, why did you choose the biodiversity room?
Well, I chose that because in our part of the world, we live on our gardens a lot. We feed from our gardens a lot. However, the scientific aspect of things is a bit lacking. So my hope is that by joining this group, I will learn a lot about how to manage gardens so that we can improve upon the vegetables we grow.
Okay, so yeah, your ideas are about probably more likely soil health.
Exactly.
And so you want to be able to test your soil and see what nutrients your soil is lacking, and be able to figure out how to add those nutrients. And I know that Abigail was saying that she wants to try to figure out how to create compost from leftover foods. So that's definitely something that you want to start thinking about. And one of the things that I noticed in my garden is crop rotation. Some things grow really well in my garden, some things don't. So I kind of learned over time, like what I should be planting. And I also figured out what yields the most amount of food. So that way I can feed more people. I don't want to put a lot of effort into a plant and a crop that I'm only going to get a small amount from, a small yield, because then I'd rather provide something that grows a lot more, right? And also like which plants are less work. Like if I have to go to the garden every day to care for all of the tomato plants, but tomatillo plants require half the amount of work from me, and they are both utilized in similar dishes. Why am I doing one and not doing the other? So, and then I also rotate my crops each year because they deplete the soil. And then I have to amend the soil every year. So like, that's another thing I do with my students. I'm lucky that I've built relationships with different organizations that bring the compost to me. So, but in the beginning, I was hiring people to go and pick up trucks of compost for me, and drop it off. And then me and the students would talk about what is nutrient dense soil, why is my soil depleted? And then honestly, the worms in the compost bins, they provide more nutrients to the soil as well. So the more worms we have, the more nutritious our soil is going to be. And then Philip, you might want to also think about, I don't know, about irrigation for your garden spaces. I mean, Anne Marie, you don't have to worry about irrigation.
Yeah, we normally use we don't rely on tap water to do our gardening. We don't do irrigation, but we use sprinklers, using normal water, drinking water. And sometimes it impacts negatively on the crop yield when you use rainwater, what you call drinking water, because of the chlorine. And what I've also observed is that you may grow one crop and to do all this year. The following you do same crop and you don't get any yield at all, or very little yield from the same crop that you've grown. And what I realize is that sometimes the soil itself is not so rich, but how to bring it up to levels that will allow it to support plant growth is probably the challenge that we have. And I'm believing that this experience will enable us to have what it takes to be able to manage the soil.
I think that you're going to need to get the soil tested in order to know what it's deficient in.
Okay.
Because it depends on what soil you're growing in and what the soil is lacking. And then you know what you need to add. Because you might need to add something completely different to your soil than I would add to mine. I know one of the things that we've added a lot of to the soil over the years is like eggshells. where we like save them and we mix them in, but that also is like we have these little grubs, and they're like, they live under the soil like worms, but they're not worms. They're not helpful. They're hurt when they hurt the garden. They eat any root vegetables. So they eat through the potatoes, all the carrots, turnips, radishes. And then they also eat the root system of the plants. So when you put eggshells in the garden, not only does it add nutrients, the grubs don't like them because they scratch them.
Okay.
So they run away. So that's like another biodiversity thing. But I'm wondering, Philip, if we can figure out a way to, I don't know how to test soil on my own.
Yes,
Like,
exactly
you
what
need
I
a
was going
kit.
to ask. How is it done? How do you test to know?
So I get a kit. So you just like
Right.
take the kit and you put the soil in and you put the little chemicals in it and you test it. But I've
Okay.
also worked with organizations that will come in and test the soil for me.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know what access you have, or maybe CELF can help you find access to soil testing kits. So you can test your soil.
Okay.
And then you can identify, it will tell you what you need to add to amend it.
Okay. Okay. I will talk to my science teachers and they'll be able to help me out in that direction.
Yeah, and be in touch with me, because maybe I can help get the kits to you in some way.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Anybody else want to ask any questions or comment? Diana or Emily?
Yeah, I wanted to add that at the beginning, well, I told you about the garden that we're gonna have, and at the beginning it seemed really like a great idea, right? Like, oh yeah, everybody was like in the sorry, my baby, the honeymoon stage. And we were all excited, but before we could actually start, we needed to clean up the area, and my students couldn't see past this dirty area that we had, and it was a little overwhelming for them, because we were only working on the garden for an hour after school, Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, and it just seemed like the trash and like everything that was there was just endless. And this happened in the fall, and then we went to winter break, and then when we came back in the spring, we were finally, well, actually after winter break, the amount of students that we had in our club went down, because they just thought like, we're just cleaning up, and we kept telling them to get discouraged. But it was really hard. And when we came back in the spring, what we tried to do to get numbers back up was have them grow just like herbs in little pots, and they were in my classroom. They weren't actually in the garden itself. But it was hard, and I was pregnant too, so I left in March, and actually at the beginning of the year, again, it was also for 4 teachers who were invested in the garden. And I mean, I knew that my time was gonna end because I was gonna give birth and I was gonna go on maternity leave. And at the end of the school year, the counselor that we were working with, she said, I need you to come back. You bring so much morale. And I was like, oh, don't tell me that. Like, the club went down in numbers and also in faculty. So we'll see when we come back, bring new energy. But at the beginning, I knew it was going to be hard, because we just had to clean up the area. You can't start. It was just a mess.
Yeah, student engagement is really important in terms of a sustainability of a club type thing, right? So what you might want to focus on in your club when you're doing it, see, I bring my students out in class. So like they'd rather be in the garden than in class. right? So what is, but if you're trying to get the interest to do like a club or an after school thing, I really enjoyed linking all of the activities that I was doing to a sustainable principle, the big idea of sustainability. So if you look back in my presentation, you'll see I did mine by week, and each week I focused on a different area of a big idea of sustainability, right? And even if I was just cleaning up, I was going to talk about how that cleanup, you know, affected other things, right? Like how is this doing this? If you can find the lesson that's embedded in the task, that connects them to what they're doing and like a bigger picture. But students do like to know that what they're doing is for a reason. Oh, all breakout rooms will close in 56 seconds. So you will have access to my presentation, me as a resource, CELF. Please, if I can help in any way, even if it's like you're frustrated and you don't know, and you kind of hit a wall and you feel like you want to give up, I'm going to tell you that I'd like to be there for you at that moment. Okay. Because those are the moments that are going to, you know, set us aside, right? If you can continue the momentum, you'll see what's going to be like in 15 years. See what you can create, right? Don't give up. All right. It was nice to meet all of you.
Yeah, nice
Bye,
meeting you too.
everybody.
Bye-bye.